The delivery guy arrived at her office with a bouquet so large he could barely see over the top of it, and Emma Hartley looked up from her desk, thinking there had been some kind of mistake. "Emma Hartley?" he asked, peering around a cascade of white roses and blue hydrangeas. "That's me, but I didn't order anything." "Someone sure did. Sign here, please." She scribbled her name on the electronic pad, her mind racing through possibilities. It was her third week working as an associate editor at Meridian Publishing, a mid-sized firm that specialized in art books and photography collections. She had no enemies, no secret admirers that she knew of, and certainly no reason to expect flowers at work. The delivery guy set the arrangement on her desk and left before she could ask any more questions. The bouquet was stunning. Easily 24 roses mixed with hydrangeas, delicate sprigs of lavender, and something else she could not quite name. A small cream-colored card sat nestled among the stems. Emma plucked it out and flipped it open. "Hoping these brighten your day. Just the letter, nothing more." "Whoa, someone has an admirer," said Karen, the graphic designer who sat in the cubicle next to hers. She had stood up to peer over the partition, eyes wide. "Those must have cost a fortune." "I have no idea who sent them," Emma said, genuinely bewildered. "Do you know anyone with a name starting with A?" Karen tilted her head, thinking. "Andrew from accounting, but he's married. And kind of old. Definitely not Andrew from accounting." Emma set the card down and stared at the flowers. They were beautiful, but the mystery made her uneasy. She spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, glancing at the bouquet every few minutes as if it might suddenly offer up answers. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she had convinced herself it was a mistake. Maybe the delivery guy had written down the wrong name. Maybe there was another Emma Hartley somewhere in the building who was supposed to receive these. She gathered her things, took one last look at the flowers, and headed home to her small apartment in Brooklyn. The next morning, another bouquet arrived. This one was even more elaborate than the first, featuring pale pink peonies, white tulips, and clusters of baby's breath arranged in a glass vase that looked like it belonged in a museum. The same cream-colored card accompanied it. "Beautiful things for a beautiful person." Emma felt her cheeks warm as Karen and 2 other co-workers gathered around her desk. "Okay, this is officially romantic," Karen said. 2 days in a row, someone is serious. "Or seriously confused," Emma muttered, but her heart was beating faster than she wanted to admit. She had always been practical, the kind of person who read the last page of a mystery novel first just to know how it ended. Romance had never been her strong suit. Her last relationship had ended almost a year ago when her ex-boyfriend decided he wanted to move to California to pursue acting, and she had chosen to stay in New York to build her career. Since then, she had thrown herself into her work, and flowers from a mysterious stranger were not part of the plan. Still, she could not help but smile as she arranged the new bouquet next to the first one. Her desk was starting to look like a florist's shop. The flowers kept coming. Every single day, a new arrangement appeared. Sunflowers and daisies, orchids in shades of purple and cream, wildflowers that looked like they had been picked from a meadow. Each one came with a card signed only with the letter A, and each message was simple but heartfelt. "Thinking of you today. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon. You deserve all the beauty in the world." By the end of the second week, Emma's desk had become a spectacle. Coworkers made excuses to walk by just to see what had arrived that day. Some made jokes, others offered theories about who the mysterious sender might be. Emma tried to brush it off, but privately, she was intrigued. Whoever this person was, they had taste and they were persistent. Maybe it's someone from the gym, suggested Lily, one of the junior editors. Do you have a membership anywhere? I go to a yoga studio, but I barely talk to anyone there, Emma said. I'm usually too focused on not falling over during tree pose. What about online? Have you been on any dating apps? Not in months, and even then, I never gave anyone my work address. The mystery deepened, and Emma found herself spending more time than she cared to admit trying to piece together clues. She made a mental list of every man she had interacted with over the past few weeks. The barista at her favorite coffee shop. The guy who held the elevator for her one morning. The man she had accidentally bumped into at the bookstore. None of them seemed like the type to send daily bouquets. One afternoon, as she was arranging the latest delivery, a cluster of white lilies and pale yellow roses, she noticed something unusual. Pressed between two of the stems was a small, delicate flower that had been flattened and preserved. It was a pansy, its purple petals still vibrant despite being dried. Emma carefully removed it and held it up to the light. "That's interesting," she murmured to herself. "What is?" Karen asked, appearing at her side. It's a pressed flower." Like someone took the time to preserve it before adding it to the bouquet. Karen leaned in for a closer look. "That's actually kind of sweet. Old-fashioned, but sweet." Emma set the pansy on her desk and stared at it for a long moment. There was something intimate about a pressed flower, something personal. It required patience and care, qualities that made the gesture feel different from simply ordering expensive arrangements online. Whoever this person was, they were putting thought into every detail. That evening, Emma mentioned the flowers to her best friend, Claire, over dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Manhattan. "So let me get this straight," Claire said, twirling pasta around her fork. "You've been getting flowers every single day for 2 weeks, and you have no idea who's sending them. Correct. And they're all signed with just the letter A. Also correct." Claire set down her fork and leaned back in her chair, a grin spreading across her face. "This is like something out of a movie. You have a secret admirer, a very wealthy secret admirer, judging by the description of those bouquets. It's weird though, right? I mean, who does that? Someone who's really into you, obviously." Claire took a sip of her wine. "Have you tried asking the florist?" Emma blinked. "I didn't even think of that. There's usually a sticker or a card with the florist's name on the packaging. Check tomorrow and give them a call. Maybe they can tell you who's been placing the orders." The next morning, Emma waited impatiently for the daily delivery. When it arrived, a stunning arrangement of red and white roses, she immediately searched for any identifying information. Sure enough, there was a small sticker on the bottom of the vase with the name Bloom & Co. and a phone number. She waited until her lunch break to make the call, stepping outside the building for privacy. "Bloom & Co., this is Sophia speaking. How can I help you?" "Hi, my name is Emma Hartley. I've been receiving daily flower deliveries from your shop, and I was wondering if you could tell me who's been sending them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, but we can't disclose that information. Client confidentiality." "I understand, but this has been going on for weeks, and I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable not knowing who's behind it. I really wish I could help, but our client specifically requested anonymity. What I can tell you is that they've prepaid for 3 months of daily deliveries, and they've been very particular about the arrangements. They clearly care a great deal. 3 months." Emma's stomach flipped. Did they say why they wanted to remain anonymous? No, but they did mention that they hoped the flowers would help you remember them. Emma's grip tightened on her phone. Remember them. So we've met before. That's all I can say. I'm really sorry I can't be more helpful. Emma thanked her and ended the call, more confused than ever. The phrase, help you remember them, echoed in her mind. She tried to think back over the past few months, searching her memory for anyone significant she might have forgotten, but nothing stood out. Her life had been routine. Work, yoga, the occasional dinner with Claire, and quiet evenings at home with a book. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction she had had in recent memory. And then, like a flash, a detail surfaced. About a month ago, she had been at a small art gallery in Chelsea for the opening of a photography exhibit. One of her authors was being featured, and Emma had attended to show her support. She remembered standing in front of a particularly striking photograph of wildflowers when someone had stepped up beside her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he had said. She had glanced over at him, taking in his appearance briefly. Tall, dark hair, sharp features, wearing a tailored suit that looked expensive even to her untrained eye. He had an air of confidence about him, but not arrogance, just ease. "It is," she had replied. "I love the way the light hits the petals. It makes them look almost translucent." They had talked for a few minutes about the exhibit, about photography, about art in general. She remembered being impressed by how knowledgeable he was, how he seemed genuinely passionate about the subject, rather than just making small talk. And then someone had called her name, one of her colleagues, and she had excused herself. She had not thought about the encounter again until now. Had that been him? The man with the dark hair and the easy smile. She tried to recall if he had introduced himself, but she could not remember. The conversation had been so brief, so casual. And yet, if that was the person sending the flowers, it meant he had made an effort to find out who she was, where she worked. That level of determination was both flattering and slightly unsettling. The next day, Emma found herself paying closer attention to the details of the bouquet that arrived. It was a mix of wildflowers, just like the ones in the photograph she had been admiring that night at the gallery. The coincidence was too strong to ignore. "I think I know who's sending these," she said to Karen during their afternoon coffee break. Karen's eyes lit up. "Spill." "I met someone at an art gallery a few weeks ago. We only talked for a few minutes, but we were standing in front of a photograph of wildflowers. And today's bouquet is all wildflowers." "That's romantic in a slightly stalkerish way," Karen said, though her tone was more amused than concerned. "So what are you going to do? Try to find him?" "I don't even know his name." "I don't know anything about him except that he has good taste in art and apparently a lot of disposable income." "Maybe that's the point. Maybe he wants you to figure it out, like a puzzle." Emma sipped her coffee, considering. If this really was the man from the gallery, then he was playing a long game. But why? What was the end game here? Did he expect her to track him down? Did he plan to reveal himself eventually? The questions piled up, and Emma realized she was more invested in finding answers than she wanted to admit. Over the next few days, she did some digging. She reached out to the gallery where the exhibit had been held and asked if they kept records of attendees. They did not, but they were able to tell her the name of the photographer whose work had been featured. Emma contacted the photographer, explaining that she was trying to get in touch with someone she had met at the opening. The photographer was kind but unhelpful. There had been over 100 people at the event, and she did not remember everyone. Emma was back to square one, or so she thought. One evening, as she was leaving the office, she noticed a man standing across the street. He was leaning against a black sedan, his hands in his pockets, and he was looking directly at her. Even from a distance, she recognized him. The dark hair, the sharp features, the tailored suit. It was the man from the gallery. Her heart kicked into a higher gear. She hesitated on the sidewalk, unsure whether to approach him or pretend she had not noticed. But then he smiled, a slow, genuine smile, and began walking toward her. "Emma Hartley," he said when he reached her. His voice was smooth, warm. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "You're the one sending the flowers," she said. It was not a question. "Guilty as charged." He extended his hand. "Alexander Crane." She shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip. "You've been sending me flowers for weeks. Why didn't you just introduce yourself?" "I wanted to see if you'd remember me," he said simply. "We only talked for a few minutes at the gallery, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. I thought if I sent flowers, maybe you'd start thinking about me too." Emma did not know whether to be flattered or exasperated. "You could have just asked me out like a normal person." "I could have," he admitted, his smile widening. "But where's the fun in that?" Despite herself, Emma laughed. There was something disarming about his honesty, about the way he seemed completely unbothered by the unconventional approach he had taken. "So what now? You've revealed yourself. What happens next?" "That depends on you," Alexander said. "I'd like to take you to dinner, somewhere nice. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other." Emma studied him for a moment. He was handsome. There was no denying that, but it was more than his looks that intrigued her. It was the confidence, the thoughtfulness behind the gesture, the way he seemed genuinely interested in her answer rather than assuming she would say yes. "Okay," she said finally. "Dinner sounds good." His smile softened into something more intimate. "How about tomorrow night? I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live. I'll meet you here then, in front of your office." "That works." They stood there for another moment, the city bustling around them, and Emma realized she was smiling. For the first time in weeks, the mystery had been solved, and the answer was standing right in front of her. The next evening, Emma spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear. She settled on a simple black dress that was elegant without being too formal, paired with heels that made her legs look longer than they were. When she stepped outside her office building at 7, Alexander was already there, leaning against the same black sedan. "You look beautiful," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "Thank you." She slid into the car, taking in the sleek interior. Everything about it screamed wealth, from the leather seats to the polished dashboard. "So where are we going?" "You'll see." He drove them to a restaurant in Tribeca, a place Emma had heard of but never been to. It was the kind of establishment where reservations were booked months in advance, and the menu did not list prices. A valet took the car, and Alexander led her inside, where they were greeted by a host who seemed to know him by name. "Mr. Crane, your table is ready." They were seated in a quiet corner with a view of the city lights. A waiter appeared almost immediately with menus and a wine list. "Order whatever you like," Alexander said. "I mean it." "This is my treat." Emma glanced at the menu, her eyes widening slightly at the descriptions. Seared scallops with truffle butter. Wagyu beef with roasted vegetables. Pan-roasted duck breast with cherry reduction. "This is a bit much for a first date, don't you think?" "Not if I want to impress you. You've already been sending me flowers every day for weeks." "I think you've made your point," he laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "Fair enough, but humor me. I've been looking forward to this." Over the course of the meal, Emma learned more about Alexander Crane. He was 32, 6 years older than she was, and he was the CEO of a real estate development company called Crane Industries. His family had been in the business for 3 generations, and he had taken over the company 5 years ago after his father retired. He was successful, driven, and clearly passionate about his work, but he also had a softer side that came through when he talked about art and photography. "I've been collecting for a few years now," he said. "Mostly contemporary stuff. That's how I ended up at the gallery that night. A friend of mine knows the photographer. And you just happened to notice me standing there." "I did. You were so focused on that photograph, like you were trying to memorize every detail. I thought it was captivating." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "I work with photographers sometimes as part of my job. I guess I have a habit of getting lost in the images. Tell me more about your job." She explained her role at Meridian Publishing, how she worked with authors and photographers to bring their visions to life in book form. It was a job she loved, even if it did not come with the kind of salary that afforded her dinners at places like this. Alexander listened intently, asking questions and seeming genuinely interested in her answers. It was refreshing. Her ex-boyfriend had always seemed impatient when she talked about work, as if her career was less important than his dreams of stardom. "You're really good at this," she said at one point. "At what?" "Listening, paying attention. A lot of guys just wait for their turn to talk," he smiled. "I've been waiting weeks to have this conversation. Why would I waste it by not paying attention?" By the time dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate tart with raspberry coulis, Emma realized she was having the best first date of her life. Alexander was charming without being overbearing, confident without being arrogant. He made her laugh, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her as a person, not just as someone he wanted to impress. After dinner, he drove her home, pulling up in front of her apartment building in Brooklyn. "Thank you for tonight," Emma said. "I had a really good time." "So did I." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I know the whole flower thing was a bit over the top, but I meant what I said. I couldn't stop thinking about you after we met. I wanted you to know that someone was thinking about you, that you mattered." Emma felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that spread through her entire body. "You're not what I expected." "Is that a good thing?" "It's a very good thing." He smiled, and for a moment Emma thought he might kiss her. But instead he reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can I see you again?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, Emma and Alexander saw each other as often as their schedules allowed. He took her to art galleries and museums, to quiet dinners and rooftop bars with views of the city. He introduced her to his favorite bookshop, a tiny place in the village that specialized in rare editions, and she introduced him to her favorite coffee shop, where the barista knew her order by heart. The flowers kept coming, one bouquet every day, each one more thoughtful than the last. Alexander never missed a day, even when he was traveling for work. Emma started pressing some of the flowers herself, preserving them in the pages of her favorite books. It became a ritual, a way of holding on to the moments they were building together. "Why do you press flowers?" Alexander asked one evening as they sat in her apartment, a bottle of wine open on the coffee table. "I don't know," Emma said, carefully placing a rose petal between the pages of a poetry collection. "I guess I like the idea of preserving something beautiful. Flowers die so quickly, but if you press them, they last forever. That's poetic. I'm an editor. It comes with the territory." He watched her work, his expression thoughtful. I press flowers too, actually. Have been since I was a kid. My grandmother taught me. She used to say that every flower tells a story, and if you press it, you can keep that story alive. Emma looked up, surprised. Really? Really? I have books full of them at home. I'd love to see them sometime. I'd love to show you. The more time Emma spent with Alexander, the more she realized how deeply she was falling for him. He was unlike anyone she had ever dated. He was thoughtful and intentional, always making her feel like she was the most important person in the room. But he was also grounded, not afraid to be vulnerable or to talk about the things that mattered to him. He told her about his struggles with taking over the family business, the pressure he felt to live up to his father's legacy. He told her about his mother, who had passed away when he was in college, and how much he missed her. He told her about his dreams of building something meaningful, not just profitable. In return, Emma found herself opening up in ways she had not expected. She told him about her childhood in upstate New York, about her parents who still lived in the same small town where she had grown up. She told him about her younger brother, who was studying engineering at Cornell, and how proud she was of him. She told him about her fears of not being good enough, of spending her whole life working in someone else's shadow. "You're not in anyone's shadow," Alexander said firmly. "You're brilliant, Emma. The work you do matters. You bring beauty into the world, and that's no small thing." She wanted to believe him, and slowly she was starting to. One Saturday afternoon, Alexander invited her to his apartment in Manhattan. It was a penthouse in a building overlooking Central Park, the kind of place Emma had only ever seen in magazines. The space was modern and tastefully decorated, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of the city. But what caught her attention were the bookshelves lining one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes and framed photographs. "This is incredible," she said, walking over to examine the collection. "Thank you. I've been adding to it for years." He pulled down one of the books, a large album with a worn leather cover, and opened it on the coffee table. Inside were dozens of pressed flowers, each one carefully labeled with a date and a location. Emma leaned over, studying them. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "You've been doing this for a long time." "It's a habit I picked up from my grandmother. She used to take me on walks through her garden, and we'd pick flowers to press. She said it was a way of holding on to the good moments." Emma looked up at him, her heart full. "I love that." He met her gaze, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Then slowly he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, but then Emma kissed him back, and the tentative became certain. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," Alexander admitted. "What took you so long?" "I wanted to make sure you wanted it too." "I do," Emma said. "I really do." Things moved quickly after that. Emma and Alexander became inseparable, spending nearly every evening together. She met his friends, successful professionals who welcomed her warmly into their circle. He met Claire, who gave him her seal of approval over brunch one Sunday morning. "He's a keeper," Claire said after Alexander excused himself to take a phone call. "I mean, the flowers alone are enough, but he's also smart and funny and clearly crazy about you." "I know," Emma said, unable to stop smiling. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it hasn't. Maybe it won't. Maybe you just found someone good." Emma wanted to believe that. And for the most part, she did. But there was a small part of her, the part that had been hurt before, that was still waiting for something to go wrong. A few weeks later, Alexander invited her to a charity gala his company was hosting. It was a black tie event, and Emma spent the afternoon shopping for a dress with Claire. She settled on a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and made her feel like someone out of a fairy tale. When Alexander picked her up that evening, his expression was worth every penny she had spent. "You're stunning," he said, his voice almost reverent. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, taking in his tuxedo. He looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. The gala was held at a historic hotel in Midtown, the kind of place with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Emma felt out of her depth at first, surrounded by New York's elite, but Alexander never left her side. He introduced her to everyone as his girlfriend, a title that made her heart swell every time she heard it. They danced, they mingled, and they laughed together in quiet corners when the small talk became too much. At one point, a woman approached them, an older lady with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Alexander, darling, it's so good to see you," she said, kissing him on both cheeks. "Mrs. Whitman, you look lovely as always. This is my girlfriend, Emma Hartley." "It's a pleasure to meet you, dear," Mrs. Whitman said, shaking Emma's hand. "Alexander's grandmother and I were very close. She would have adored you." "Thank you," Emma said, touched by the sentiment. Mrs. Whitman leaned in conspiratorially. "He's been sending you flowers, hasn't he? Daily bouquets." Emma blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" "Because his grandmother used to do the same thing for his grandfather. Every single day, a fresh flower from her garden. She believed it was the key to a lasting love." Mrs. Whitman smiled at Alexander. "I'm glad to see he's carrying on the tradition." Emma looked at Alexander, who had the grace to look a little sheepish. "You didn't tell me that," she said. "I wanted it to be my own thing, not just something I copied from my grandparents. But yeah, she's the one who taught me that gestures matter. That's showing someone you care. Every single day makes a difference." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to ruin her makeup, but the emotion was overwhelming. This man, this incredible man, had been putting so much thought and care into their relationship from the very beginning, and she was falling in love with him. No, she realized, she had already fallen. That night, after the gala, they went back to Alexander's apartment. They stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, and Emma turned to him. "I love you," she said. The words came out easier than she expected, like they had been waiting for the right moment to be spoken. Alexander's expression softened, and he cupped her face in his hands. "I love you too, Emma. I think I've loved you since the moment I saw you at that gallery." He kissed her, and this time it was deeper, more urgent. They made their way to the bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions along the way. When they finally came together, it was tender and passionate, a perfect blend of everything they had been building toward. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms, the city quiet around them. "I want this to last," Alexander said softly. "I want us to last." "So do I," Emma whispered. And she meant it with every fiber of her being. The next few months were a whirlwind of happiness. Emma and Alexander fell into a rhythm that felt natural and right. She continued working at Meridian Publishing, and he continued running Crane Industries, but they made time for each other every single day. Sometimes it was just a quick coffee in the morning or a late-night phone call, but it was always something. The flowers never stopped coming, and Emma's apartment became a garden of preserved petals and stems. One evening, as they were having dinner at her place, Emma mentioned something casually that she had been thinking about for weeks. "I've been pressing some of the flowers you send me," she said, gesturing to the stack of books on her shelf. "It's become a bit of a hobby." Alexander looked up from his plate, his eyes bright. Can I see? She retrieved one of the books, a collection of poems by Mary Oliver, and opened it to reveal a pressed daisy. This was from the bouquet you sent the day we went to the museum. And this, she flipped to another page, was from the day we had that picnic in Central Park. Alexander studied the flowers, his expression unreadable. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. You're preserving our memories. I guess I am. I do the same thing, he said. Every flower I send you, I keep one for myself and press it. I have them all in an album at home. Emma's breath caught. You do? I want to remember every moment with you, every single one. She felt tears welling up again, but this time she did not try to stop them. You're going to make me cry. Good tears, I hope. The best tears. He stood up, pulling her into his arms, and they stayed like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other and the quiet certainty of what they were building together. As their relationship deepened, Emma began to understand the full extent of Alexander's success. Crane Industries was not just a successful company, it was an empire. Alexander oversaw projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and his name carried weight in the world of real estate development. But he never flaunted his wealth or used it to define himself. To him, it was simply a tool to build things he believed in. One afternoon, he took her to see one of his latest projects, a residential complex in Queens designed to provide affordable housing without sacrificing quality or design. Emma walked through the newly completed units, marveling at the attention to detail. This is incredible, she said. You're really making a difference. That's the goal, Alexander replied. Money is meaningless if you're not doing something good with it. It was moments like these that made Emma fall even more deeply in love with him. He was not just wealthy, he was purposeful. He used his resources to create positive change, and he did it without seeking recognition or praise. As summer turned to fall, Alexander started hinting at the future. Little comments here and there about where they might travel, what kind of home they might want to build together, how many kids they might want someday. Emma found herself thinking about those things too, imagining a life with him that stretched out for decades. One crisp October evening, Alexander took her back to the gallery where they had first met. There was another exhibit opening, and he wanted to share it with her. They stood in front of a photograph of a field of wildflowers, just like the one they had admired all those months ago. This is where it all started, Alexander said. I know. He turned to her, and there was something different in his expression, something nervous and hopeful all at once. Emma, I need to ask you something. Her heart began to race. Okay. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Then, to her shock and delight, he dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the gallery. Emma Hartley, you are the most incredible person I have ever met. You're brilliant and kind, and you see the world in a way that makes me want to be better. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. Will you marry me? Emma's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, a stunning diamond set in a delicate gold band, and stood up to kiss her. Around them, people in the gallery began to clap, but Emma barely noticed. All she could see was Alexander, the man who had sent her flowers every single day just to make sure she remembered him. The man who had become her whole world. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a historic estate in the Hudson Valley. Emma's parents were there, along with her brother and Claire and all of Alexander's friends and family. The ceremony was held outdoors, surrounded by gardens in full bloom, and Emma carried a bouquet of pressed and fresh flowers, a blend of the past and the present. As they exchanged vows, Emma felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. This was the man she was meant to spend her life with. The man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved her for exactly who she was. At the reception, Mrs. Whitman approached Emma with a knowing smile. "I told you his grandmother would have adored you." "I wish I could have met her," Emma said. "She would have loved the way you press flowers." It would have meant the world to her to know that Alexander found someone who understands the importance of preserving beauty. Emma glanced over at Alexander, who was laughing with her brother, and her heart swelled with love. "I'm the lucky one. You both are." The years that followed were filled with love and laughter and all the small, beautiful moments that make a life. Emma continued working at Meridian Publishing, eventually becoming a senior editor. Alexander's company continued to grow, but he always made time for the things that mattered most: his wife, his family, and the life they were building together. They traveled to Italy and France, to Japan and New Zealand, always bringing back pressed flowers from each place they visited. Their home, a brownstone in Brooklyn that they renovated together, was filled with albums of preserved petals and photographs of their adventures. 2 years after their wedding, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Lily. She had Alexander's dark hair and Emma's green eyes, and she was the light of their lives. A few years later, a son named Oliver joined the family, and their home was filled with the chaos and joy of parenthood. Alexander never stopped sending flowers. Even after years of marriage, even after the sleepless nights and the messy toddler years and the everyday challenges of life, a bouquet arrived at Emma's office every single week. Sometimes it was a grand arrangement, other times just a single stem, but it was always there. A reminder that he was thinking of her, that she mattered. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching their kids play in the living room, Emma leaned her head on Alexander's shoulder. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asked. "Of course. You were standing in front of that photograph of wildflowers, completely absorbed. I never thought a casual conversation could lead to all of this. Neither did I, but I'm glad it did." Emma looked down at the pressed flower she had been working on, a rose from the bouquet Alexander had sent her that week. "You know, I used to think pressing flowers was just about preserving beauty. But now I think it's about more than that. It's about holding on to the moments that matter, the ones you never want to forget." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "Then we're going to need a lot more books." She laughed, and the sound filled the room, mixing with the laughter of their children. This, Emma thought, was what happiness looked like. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but the quiet, everyday moments of a life built with someone you loved. Someone who saw you, who chose you, who sent you flowers just to remind you that you were loved. As the years went on, Emma and Alexander's love only deepened. They faced challenges, as all couples do. There were moments of stress and disagreement, times when work pulled them in different directions, or when the demands of parenting felt overwhelming. But they always came back to each other, always found their way through. Their children grew, and Emma and Alexander made it a point to teach them the same lessons they had learned from Alexander's grandmother. They took Lily and Oliver on walks through parks and gardens, showing them how to press flowers and preserve the beauty they found in the world. It became a family tradition, something that connected them all. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Alexander surprised Emma with a trip to the same gallery where they had first met. He had arranged for a private viewing, just the two of them, and they stood once again in front of a photograph of wildflowers. "This is where it all began," he said, echoing the words he had spoken years earlier. "And look where we are now," Emma replied, slipping her hand into his. "I'd do it all over again. Every single day." "So would I." They stood there together, surrounded by art and beauty and the memories of a love that had grown from a chance encounter into a lifetime of happiness. And when they left the gallery that night, Alexander handed Emma a single pressed flower, a pansy, just like the one that had been hidden in that first bouquet all those years ago. "For your collection," he said. Emma held it carefully, feeling the delicate texture of the petals. "I'll treasure it forever, just like I treasure you." They walked out into the city, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, because they had each other and that was all they needed. A love built on thoughtfulness and care, on daily gestures and preserved moments, on a man who sent flowers and a woman who pressed them, holding on to the beauty of a life they had built together. And every single day for the rest of their lives, Alexander continued to send Emma flowers, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because he wanted her to know every single day that she was loved, that she was remembered, that she was his whole world. Emma pressed each one, filling book after book with the petals and stems of their love story. And when their grandchildren asked about the flowers years later, she would tell them the same story she had told their parents. "Every flower tells a story," she would say, opening one of the albums. "And if you press it, you can keep that story alive forever." It was a lesson she had learned from Alexander, who had learned it from his grandmother. A lesson about love and memory, and the importance of holding on to the moments that mattered. And it was a lesson that would be passed down through generations, a legacy of pressed flowers and preserved love, because some things are too beautiful to let go. Some moments are too precious to forget, and some loves are worth preserving, petal by petal, day by day, for the rest of your life. Emma and Alexander had found that kind of love, and it was the greatest gift either of them had ever received.